Welcome to the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. Are you a passionate believer in liberty and democracy? Are you concerned about the growing infiltration of Marxist and socialist ideology in our politics, media, and culture? This podcast was created by a citizen of the United States who was born and raised in Romania, a socialist country in Eastern Europe, during the 1970s and 1980s. As more and more members of our youth pivot towards Marxism, socialism, and communism in the United States of America and beyond, now, more than ever, it is important to focus on liberty and democracy, instead of the alluring Marxist and socialist trends which, as history repeatedly has shown, lead to repressive authoritarian regimes. Marxism does not lead to utopia either in the United States of America, or anywhere else in the world. Let us question governments, policies, and manufactured social progressivism. Let us go back to the times when it was okay for us to agree to disagree.
Welcome to the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. For the next few months, our podcast episodes published on Mondays will include excerpts from Maestro Cercia's ebook, It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government. Are you ready? Let's begin.
We're now about to listen to Maestro Cercia's ebook titled, It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government. Chapter 7, Obstacles and Opposition. Political Resistance. Introduction to Political Resistance. Political resistance is a formidable force that stands in the way of limiting government power. It is a concept deeply intertwined with the struggle for individual freedom, as it reveals the lengths to which politicians and special interest groups will go to maintain control and protect their own interests. As a concerned citizen who has witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of an oppressive regime, I understand the urgent need for political resistance to be examined and confronted. In this chapter, I delve into the motivations behind political resistance, the strategies employed by those who resist, and the importance of monitoring and combating this resistance. Political resistance from politicians. The resistance to limit government power often originates from the very people entrusted with representing the will of the electorate, the politicians themselves. They fear relinquishing their influence and control over the machinery of government. To them, reducing the size and authority of government would mean relinquishing their own power. This self-interest drives their resistance, as they prioritize their own political careers over the well-being of the citizens they were elected to serve. Examples of such politicians are aplenty. Many elected officials within both major political parties have actively opposed efforts to curtail government power. They champion expanded government programs, regulations, and interventions, disregarding the unintended consequences and stifling of individual liberties that often accompany these measures. Their resistance is rooted in a desire to please their base, cater to party priorities, and secure their own re-election prospects. By resisting limitations on government power, they perpetuate the very system that allows them to remain in control. Special interest groups and their resistance. Beyond the realm of electoral politics lies the realm of special interest groups, who wield significant influence over policy decisions. These groups, often consisting of lobbyists, industry associations, and other organizations, resist the reduction of government power in order to protect their own vested interests. They understand that a larger government allows for greater opportunities to advance their own agendas and secure favorable outcomes for their constituents. Examples of such resistance from special interest groups are numerous. Lobbying efforts funded by corporate giants have successfully swayed politicians, ensuring that government regulations favor their industries and stifle competition. Industry associations have utilized their financial resources and influence to shape legislation and regulations that benefit their members, often at the expense of the general public. These special interest groups recognize that a larger, more intrusive government can be leveraged to serve their interests, making them a formidable force in the resistance against limiting government power. Strategies employed by politicians and special interest groups. The resistance to limiting government power from politicians and special interest groups relies on a variety of strategies designed to perpetuate the status quo. This resistance is rooted in the manipulation of public opinion, utilizing tactics such as lobbying, campaign contributions, media manipulation, and public relations campaigns. These strategies are utilized to sway public sentiment, maintain the perception of widespread support, and ultimately ensure that efforts to limit government power are met with resistance. Lobbying is perhaps the most notorious tactic employed by both politicians and special interest groups. This practice involves providing financial incentives, favors, and access to elected officials in exchange for favorable policies. The goal is to build relationships and influence key decision-makers to protect their own interests. Campaign contributions play a similar role, encouraging politicians to remain subservient to those who fund their election campaigns. Media manipulation and public relations campaigns are additional strategies employed by those who seek to resist efforts to limit government power. Through the control of media narratives and the dissemination of carefully crafted messages, they can shape public opinion and discredit those who advocate for smaller government. By leveraging their influence and control over the media landscape, they manipulate the discourse to serve their own ends. Arguments against limiting government power. Those who resist limitations on government power often articulate arguments that justify their stance, making it imperative for proponents of limited government to counter these assertions effectively. These arguments include the notion that government intervention is essential, that reducing government oversight could lead to negative consequences, and that limitations on government power undermine democracy itself. One commonly cited argument is that certain areas of society require government intervention to address market failures or correct social injustices. Advocates for expanded government power argue that without government intervention, there would be no checks and balances to prevent abuse by powerful entities or to provide essential public services. However, proponents of limited government argue that excessive government involvement can actually create market distortions and prevent the private sector from effectively addressing societal needs. Another argument put forth by those resisting limitations on government power is the concern over potential negative consequences that might arise from reduced government oversight. They argue that regulations and government programs serve to protect individuals and safeguard against potential harm. However, proponents of limited government contend that excessive regulations stifle economic growth, create barriers to entry for small businesses, and restrict individual freedom. They assert that alternative mechanisms, such as voluntary associations and self-regulation, are often more efficient and effective in maintaining societal order. Lastly, those who resist limitations on government power claim that such restrictions undermine democracy itself by limiting the ability of elected officials to respond to the needs and desires of the electorate. They argue that a strong and expansive government is necessary to protect and advance the interests of the people. However, proponents of limited government maintain that an unchecked and bloated government can actually undermine the principles of democracy by concentrating power and stifling individual freedoms. They believe that true democracy requires a balance of power and a system of checks and balances to prevent the abuse of authority. Monitoring and combating political resistance. The resistance to limiting government power reminds us of the constant need for vigilance and the importance of monitoring and combating this resistance. By shining a light on the strategies employed by politicians and special interest groups, we can begin to challenge the prevailing status quo and strive for meaningful change. Transparency and accountability are of utmost importance in the decision-making process. The public must actively participate in holding elected officials accountable and demanding a reduction in government power. Grassroots movements, driven by the passion and determination of concerned citizens, often play a pivotal role in overcoming political resistance. History has shown us the power of public pressure to drive meaningful change and overcome entrenched interests. Examples can be found in the civil rights movement, the fight for women's suffrage, and numerous other movements that have successfully challenged the status quo. By mobilizing, organizing, and mobilizing public support, we can overcome political resistance and achieve meaningful limitations on government power. The role of the media in political resistance. The media, as a critical element of the democratic process, has a significant role to play in combating political resistance to limited government. However, the concentration of media ownership and biased reporting often hinder efforts to promote a more limited government. Media outlets, influenced by their own interests or those of their financial backers, can perpetuate a narrative that favors expanded government power and resists efforts to limit it. This bias and sensationalism detract from informed public discourse and make it challenging to overcome political resistance effectively. Independent and critical media outlets are crucial in holding politicians and special interest groups accountable. They play a vital role in providing accurate information, challenging prevailing narratives, and offering alternative perspectives. By diversifying media ownership and supporting independent journalism, we can create an environment that challenges the status quo and promotes meaningful limitations on government power. Overcoming political resistance, lessons from history. History is replete with examples of successful movements and leaders who have overcome political resistance and achieved meaningful limitations on government power. The fight for American independence, the civil rights movement, and the push for women's suffrage all serve as reminders of the immense power of collective action and grassroots organizing. By drawing inspiration from these historical achievements, we can galvanize support for limited government and work towards meaningful change. Building coalitions and promoting compromise. The resistance to limiting government power necessitates the formation of broad-based coalitions that transcend ideological and partisan divides. By building bridges between diverse groups, we can bring together individuals who share a common interest in reducing government influence. Successful coalitions that bridge political divides have achieved bipartisan support for measures to limit government power. These examples demonstrate the necessity of compromise and finding common ground to achieve meaningful change. Conclusion. Political resistance poses a formidable challenge to those advocating for limited government. It is driven by the self-interest of politicians and the influence of special interest groups, who fear losing power and control. Through lobbying, media manipulation, and various other tactics, these forces seek to resist efforts to limit government power. However, through vigilance, grassroots organizing, and the promotion of independent media, we can overcome political resistance and achieve meaningful limitations on government power. The fight for limited government is an ongoing struggle that requires collective action and unwavering commitment. It is a fight that must be fought, not just for our present, but for the future of our democratic society.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. We hope you found today's content interesting, intriguing, and useful. You're invited to join us again, as our podcast episodes are now published every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In the meanwhile, don't forget to stop by our website at www.libertarian.center or our Liberty and Democracy YouTube channel at bit.ly/democracyvideos.